Welcome. My name is Alexander Somek. I'm a professor of legal philosophy in the University of Vienna Faculty of Law. But I've held positions elsewhere too, for example, in the United States for more than a decade. And the book that I've just published with our publishing company is, in a sense, the upshot, the result of a relatively long itinerary, intellectually and geographically. And it's a book that tries to bridge the gap between legal traditions in legal philosophy and legal theory in particular. And the traditions that are relevant are the Anglo-American on the one hand, and the German-speaking tradition on the other. Now here's the book. Knowing What the Law Is, Legal Theory in a New Key. That's the title of the book. When I started writing it, I thought that I would write an easily accessible introduction to legal theory. And you know what? In my view, it still is an easily accessible and easy to understand introduction to legal philosophy. At the same time, it turned out, as I was writing it, that it turned into something that's a little bit more advanced, perhaps, than a mere introduction. And it is so for two reasons. The first reason is that I'm trying to give an account of legal theory as a theoretical genre, as an intellectual enterprise that people engaged in at a certain point for a certain reason. And the reason that I identify in this book is that legal scholarship as an academic discipline and as an intellectual pursuit entered into a profound crisis at the turn from the 19th to the 20th century. And legal theory is a genre that is developed in order to respond to this crisis and to restore the respectability of legal scholarship that had come under severe challenge by currents of thought such as the by now almost forgotten free law movement in Germany and the much more famous American legal realist movement that had a lasting impact on scholarship in the United States in particular. Now, this is the story that I tell. Legal theory emerges, here it is, knowing what the law is, as an attempt to respond to an intellectual crisis with the aim to restore the respectability of legal scholarship. Two scholars stand out in particular if you look at the history. I'm saying this from a distance. Yeah, it's unfair to many brilliant minds, of course. Yeah, if you single out two particular scholars, but the ones that I find particularly interesting and fascinating, and their projects really worth studying, are Hans Kelsen on the one hand, a continental European legal theorist, and Ronald Dworkin on the other, an American legal philosopher. They have done their utmost to restore the credibility of legal scholarship, to make it into an intellectually respectable enterprise. And yet, we have to conclude that their projects fail. And this is the second part of my project that I pursue in this book. I try to explain why all of these projects were doomed to failure. And the explanation that I give is that legal theory, with the strange universe that it creates with legal rules, principles, systems, the idea that a legal system could be gapless, and all these number of concepts that you encounter, all these concepts that you encounter in legal theory, that this is only a sideshow. That this is not what is really important about law. The most important thing about law is that it is a particular relation between and among people, a way of engaging with one another when we give reasons for our actions. So this is at the core of the book. I reconstruct the story of legal theory, however, with the basic understanding that the story is doomed to failure to begin with because it has never arrived at the right perspective of what the law really is, namely a relation between and among people. This explains why the first chapter and the last chapter, in a sense, provide a framework for the story that I tell. And this framework actually anticipates already the right conclusion that has to be drawn towards the end of the book, of this story. Now, I mentioned that this was also supposed to be, or is actually supposed to be, from my view, it can be used for that purpose as an introduction to legal theory. For outsiders, for people who have no idea what legal theory is. So it's really a book that is aimed at beginners, even though perhaps philosophically it's a little bit more advanced than other introductions. But for that reason, the book is not only an account of the history of legal theory, it is also a play. It is a play that introduces a cast of characters, an interesting cast of characters. Some of the characters are really fascinating. For example, a poet makes an appearance at a certain point in this book, and actually developing all kinds of strange ideas. A judge plays a major and actually even an evil role in this book. Why do I introduce a cast of characters and introduce elements of a play into this book? I do so in order to make it more accessible to the reader, because there is one cardinal sin that has been committed by those who actually pursued the project of legal theory in the latter half of the 20th century. And that major intellectual sin was to produce boredom among the readers. Legal theory is such a fascinating and fun topic. And yet, if you look at the writings that are out there in this world, they are terribly boring to read. Not all of them, but most of them. I wanted to avoid this boredom. So this is a book, an invitation to study legal theory and with the basic presumption that it's a fun topic to study, on the one hand. But on the other hand, it's an invitation to study legal theory as something that has run its course, because the author of this book has already taken the next step. He has moved on to an understanding of law that views it as a particular relation among people. So this is the end and the new beginning. Enjoy.